Here's something almost nobody outside a real hot pot restaurant knows. Dipping your meat in the same broth over and over throughout the meal? Totally fine, no problem at all. But boiling that exact same broth a third time at home, days or even hours later? That's the mistake that quietly ruins the entire pot, and most people don't even notice until the flavor's already gone flat and slightly bitter without an obvious cause. We'll show you exactly why that happens at number 1. Because today, we're counting down 31 hot pot tricks that restaurants use every single day that most home cooks have genuinely never even heard of. From the broth, to the meat, to the dipping sauce nobody can ever seem to get right. Let's get straight into it. Number 31. The toasted spice secret. Most people just dump their spices straight into cold broth and let them simmer for an hour, assuming time alone pulls out the flavor. Restaurants don't do that. They toast whole spices, star anise, Sichuan peppercorns, dried chilies, in a dry pan for about 30 seconds before they ever touch the liquid. Here's why that matters. A lot of what makes a spice taste like something lives in its essential oils, and those oils are released by heat, not water. Toasting cracks the surface of the spice just enough to let that aroma escape into the air and into the broth. Skip this step, and you can simmer all day, but the broth still tastes strangely flat. Number 30. The wine timing trick. Rice wine, specifically Shaoxing wine, is something most people add at the start of cooking, thinking it needs time to cook in like a marinade. That's backwards. A splash added at the very end, right before serving, keeps almost all of its aroma intact. Added early and that fragrance simply evaporates over the next hour of simmering, leaving behind nothing but a faint bitterness from the alcohol that never had a chance to cook off cleanly. Number 29. The split pot rule. Here's one almost every hot pot restaurant in China does that home cooks skip entirely. The split pot. One side mild, one side numbing spicy, divided by a metal partition right down the middle. This isn't just for variety between people who like different spice levels. Delicate ingredients like fish slices and silken tofu physically fall apart in an aggressive bubbling mala broth before they even finish cooking, while heartier cuts like beef and lamb can handle that intensity and actually taste better for it. Cook everything together in one broth, and you're forcing every single ingredient into a cooking environment it was never built for. Number 28. The real broth base. What your broth is actually built on matters more than people think. Bouillon cubes give you salt and maybe a little fat, but almost none of the body that makes restaurant hot pot broth feel different in your mouth. Real broth starts with chicken feet or pork bones simmered for at least an hour, sometimes 2, before anything else even goes in. That long simmer slowly breaks down collagen from the bones and joints into gelatin, and that's the actual source of the thick, almost silky mouthfeel you get at a restaurant. A stock cube can fake the saltiness, it can't fake that texture. And if you're choosing between the two, chicken feet give you a lighter, cleaner body that works well under almost any seasoning, while pork bones give you a heavier, richer base that holds up better against bold spice. Some restaurants actually combine both in the same pot for exactly that reason. Number 27. The skim step. The first boil matters more than most people realize, the moment bones and meat first hit boiling water. A layer of gray foam rises straight to the surface. Most home cooks stir that foam back into the pot, assuming they're saving flavor that would otherwise go to waste. In reality, that foam is mostly blood proteins and impurities being forced out of the meat. Skim it off completely within the first 5 minutes of boiling and your broth stays clear. Stir it back in, and your broth turns slightly cloudy and faintly bitter for the entire rest of the cook. Number 26. The ice cube fix, a fast one. If your pot ever threatens to boil over right at the table, don't reach for a spoon to stir it down. Drop in a single ice cube instead. It cools just the surface layer enough to break the boil almost instantly, without watering down the entire pot's flavor the way a full ladle of cold water would. Number 25. The sauce mistake nobody catches. Even with a perfect broth, there's a mistake almost everyone makes later with their dipping sauce that quietly undoes half of that work. We'll fix that one properly at number 13, so don't skip ahead. Number 24. The mala oil method. Mala oil is the actual source of heat behind Sichuan-style hot pot. Most people just pour bottled chili oil straight into the pot and call it done. Restaurants build it in 3 separate steps instead. Toast the dried chilies and peppercorns in a dry pan first, then infuse them slowly in warm oil for about 10 minutes so the heat compounds actually transfer into the fat, then strain out the solids before that oil ever touches the broth. That layering process is the real difference between heat that just burns your tongue and heat that actually carries flavor along with it. And while we're on the broth, if you want to keep it warm between rounds without constantly reboiling it, drop the heat down to the lowest setting that still keeps a faint simmer going. That keeps it safely hot for the next round without putting it through another full rolling boil, which is exactly the mistake number 1 is about to warn you against. Number 23. The semi-frozen slice. Now let's talk about the food itself. Slice your meat while it's still semi-frozen, not fully thawed. Partially frozen meat holds its shape firmly under a knife, which lets you cut paper-thin slices that cook through in under 15 seconds at the table. Fully thawed meat squishes and tears under the same pressure, and you end up with thick, uneven pieces that take far longer to cook and turn tough in the middle while the edges overcook. Once it's sliced, lay it out on the serving plate in a single layer instead of piling it up. Stacked slices stick together and tear when someone tries to pick up just one piece, especially once they've sat out and softened slightly at room temperature. Number 22. The mushroom score. Thick-stemmed mushroom varieties like shiitake or king oyster cook unevenly if you toss them in whole, since the dense stem cooks much slower than the thin cap above it. Score a shallow X into the stem before it goes into the pot. That cut lets heat penetrate the center at nearly the same rate as the cap, so you're not left biting into a raw, fibrous middle while the top is already overdone. Number 21. The dry tofu rule. Pat your tofu completely dry with a paper towel before it goes anywhere near the broth. Tofu holds a surprising amount of water inside it, and wet tofu releases that moisture the second it hits hot liquid. That's exactly what turns a perfectly clear broth cloudy within minutes, even if you did everything else right. Number 20. The ingredient order. This one actually matters more than people realize. The order you add ingredients in. Root vegetables and anything dense like potato, daikon, or lotus root go in first because they need the longest cook time to soften all the way through, sometimes 8 to 10 minutes depending on how thick you've cut them. Leafy greens go in last, right before eating, because 30 seconds in boiling broth is genuinely all they need before they wilt down completely. Most home cooks dump everything into the pot at the same time because it feels faster, and the result is mushy, overcooked greens sitting right next to undercooked, crunchy roots in the exact same bite. Two textures that were never supposed to land on your plate together. Number 19. The velveting technique. If you've ever had restaurant-style beef that stays tender even after sitting in hot broth for a while, velveting is the technique behind it. Toss thin sliced meat in a small amount of cornstarch and egg white before it ever touches the pot. That mixture forms a very thin protective coating around each slice, which locks moisture inside the meat as it cooks. Skip it, and the proteins tighten up fast in hot liquid, leaving you with meat that turns tough and stringy within seconds of overcooking. Number 18. The pre-blanch step. Fatty cuts like pork belly or lamb shoulder need a quick 10-second blanch in plain boiling water before they go into your actual hot pot. That short blanch renders off a layer of surface fat and any gamminess sitting just under the surface, so none of that ends up clouding or flavoring your main broth later. And if you're using the pre-sliced frozen lamb and beef rolls most grocery stores sell for hot pot, thaw them in the fridge overnight instead of on the counter. A slow thaw keeps the slices intact, while a fast counter thaw makes the thin layers stick together into one clump that tears apart right before serving. Number 17. The pre-cut greens. Simple, but it saves real time at the table. Cut your leafy greens into bite-sized pieces back in the kitchen, not at the table with chopsticks. It keeps the meal moving naturally, and it stops everyone from awkwardly wrestling an oversized leaf mid-conversation. Number 16. The sauce bowl secret. And up next is one almost nobody outside a restaurant kitchen knows about: the dipping sauce. The thing that's probably been quietly going wrong in your sauce bowl this entire time without you realizing it. Number 15. The sesame paste whisk. If you've ever had sesame paste seize into a thick, stubborn clump the second it hits your bowl, you skipped a step. Whisk in warm water a little at a time before adding anything else to the bowl. Cold liquid or oil added first causes sesame paste to tighten and clump almost instantly because the fat in the paste resists blending with cold liquid. Warm water loosens the paste structure first, so everything you add after that blends in smoothly instead of fighting it. Number 14. The sauce build order, the actual order to build a proper hot pot dipping sauce. Base first, like sesame paste or soy sauce. Then aromatics, like minced garlic and chopped scallion. Then your acid, like vinegar. Oil goes in dead last. Build it in any other order, and the flavors tend to separate into distinct layers in the bowl instead of coming together as one balanced sauce. Number 13. The clump-proof ratio. Here's the fix we promised back at number 25. If your sesame paste sauce still feels too thick even after adding warm water, restaurants rely on a specific ratio. 2 parts sesame paste to 1 part warm water, whisked in slowly and steadily, then adjusted further with a teaspoon of broth at a time until it reaches the consistency of heavy cream. Get that ratio right just once, and you'll never deal with a clumped sauce bowl again. Number 12. The raw garlic rule. Garlic and cilantro go in raw, and they go in last, right before serving, never cooked into the sauce ahead of time. Raw garlic carries a sharp, bright bite that mellows fast and can actually turn bitter the moment it sits too long in liquid. Cilantro loses its fresh brightness almost as quickly once it's been sitting in an acidic sauce for more than a few minutes. And make individual sauce bowls instead of one large communal bowl everyone dips into. Beyond the obvious hygiene reason, it lets each person adjust their own ratio of chili, garlic, and vinegar to taste. Number 11. The broth and sauce trick. A trick almost no one knows. Stir a spoonful of the actual hot pot broth itself into your dipping sauce. It instantly ties the flavor of whatever you're eating to the sauce you're dipping it in, instead of the sauce tasting like something completely disconnected from the meal in front of you. Number 10. The crushed peanut layer. Crushed peanuts aren't just a garnish for looks. They add a textural contrast against the smoothness of sesame-based sauce, which is exactly why you'll see them in almost every properly built hot pot sauce bowl in Sichuan-style restaurants. And one more before we move on. If the broth side you're eating from is heavy and spicy, restaurants often serve a second completely different sauce alongside it. Just black vinegar with a little minced garlic and chili oil, nothing else, meant to cut through richness instead of adding more of it. Number 9. The overcrowding mistake. This fixes a problem almost everyone runs into without realizing the cause. Don't overcrowd the pot. Dropping in a large handful of meat all at once cools the surrounding broth below boiling, and instead of searing quickly, everything just sits there and steams limply. Cook in small batches instead, so the broth stays at a real rolling boil the entire time you're eating. Number 8. The exact timing chart. This is the one that separates a genuinely good hot pot night from a frustrating one. Exact timing per ingredient. Thin sliced beef or lamb needs roughly 10 to 15 seconds in boiling broth, no more. You're looking for the moment it just barely loses its raw red color and starts to curl slightly at the edges. Dense root vegetables like potato or daikon need 5 minutes or longer to soften properly all the way through, with no resistance left when you press a piece against your teeth. Guess wrong in either direction, and you end up with either rubbery, overcooked meat that's lost all its tenderness, or a hard, crunchy root vegetable that nobody at the table actually wants to eat. Number 7. The personal strainer basket. Give each person their own small strainer basket instead of one shared pot for everyone. It sounds minor, but it stops food from getting lost in a crowded shared pot, and it means nobody's digging around blindly with chopsticks trying to find their own meatball or shrimp. And if you're using a portable butane burner at the table rather than a built-in induction pot, always check the flame size first. Too large for the pot's base waste gas and heats unevenly, so adjust it down until the flame sits just under the pot's rim. Number 6. The rolling boil rule. Keep the broth at a real visible rolling boil, not a gentle simmer. A simmer cooks meat slowly and unevenly from the outside in, which is exactly what makes thin slices turn rubbery by the time the center catches up. A hard, steady boil sears the surface fast, locking in moisture and keeping thin-sliced meat tender. Number 5. The aromatics in broth trick. Aromatics, like fresh ginger slices and scallion, belong simmering directly in the broth itself, not just sprinkled on top as a garnish at the end. Letting them sit in the liquid the whole time means every single ladle gets infused with that flavor, not just whatever happened to be floating in the first scoop. And a small one most people throw away without thinking. If you're using dried shiitake mushrooms, don't toss the soaking water once they've softened. That water is loaded with the same savory compounds the mushroom released, and a splash of it stirred into your broth adds a depth plain water never will. Number 4. The trick even restaurants miss. The very last trick coming up is one that even some restaurants get wrong, so don't skip it. Number 3. The broth-saving habit. Don't toss your leftover broth down the drain at the end of the night. Strain out all the solids and freeze what's left in portioned containers. That broth is already infused with faux hours of simmered flavor, and it becomes a genuine head start the next time you make hot pot again, or even just a quick soup or fried rice during the week. Number 2, the 2-boil limit. Never bring the same batch of broth back to a full boil more than twice. Each time it returns to a hard boil, the oils and aromatic compounds inside continue to break down further than the time before. What started rich and fragrant gradually turns flat and eventually bitter, well before it looks or smells, obviously, off. 2 uses at a full boil is the realistic limit before you're better off starting a fresh batch. Number 1, the dip versus boil rule. And finally, the trick we opened with, double dipping your own chopsticks back into the shared broth throughout the meal, is genuinely fine, despite what you might assume about it. The real mistake is treating that same broth as freely reusable for a third full boil after the meal is already over. Restaurants that have run hot pot service for years all follow the same unspoken rule. Enjoy the pot fully the first time around, save and freeze whatever's left, but never bring that same batch back to a hard boil more than twice total. That one detail is the actual line between a broth that stays restaurant quality and one that quietly turns bitter on you without any obvious warning sign. That's all 31. From the broth to the meat to the sauce nobody quite gets right on the first try, to the small equipment habits that make the whole night run smoother. None of these require special ingredients or expensive gear, just doing the small steps in the right order. If you try even 5 of these on your very next hot pot night, you'll notice the difference almost immediately, especially in the broth and the sauce. And if you want to see this same restaurant-level logic applied to fried rice next, let us know in the comments below.